Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our chairman, Ambassador John Negroponte, and the INSA membership, thank all of you for being with us this evening. I'd like to offer a special thanks to our dinner sponsors. This means a great deal to INSA and to all of us here, and these sponsors are very critical to the vibrancy of this organization and its mission. So a special thanks to Boeing, to General Dynamics, to Lockheed Martin, to SAP NS2, and to BAE Systems and Harris. Thank all of you for sponsoring this event. I would also like to offer a special thanks to Raytheon for their sponsorship of the board reception. Thank you, Raytheon. Your support is critical to events like this, which allow for important interaction between the public, private, and academic sectors to discuss and to work issues that touch our nation's national security. So this is very critical. And we appreciate the great work you and other contractors play working side by side with the government counterparts to ensure that our nation is secure. Thank you for that. This event is one of many in our busy season at INSA, and we have some exciting events coming up. And I noticed they put a clock in front of me now. It's sort of like when you're testifying on the Hill and they give you how much time, and then it goes to the middle, and then it's red, so I have to do this quickly. But this is important because this affects all of us here. We're presently, and this is an event that has really resonated with all of us in this room and our other members. We're currently in the process of collecting nominations for the 4th Annual INSA Achievement Awards. Nominations are due Monday, on the 19th of August, and the award dinner will be held in November. The INSA Achievement Awards recognizes the accomplishments of young professionals in intelligence and national security, as well as the mentors who inspire these young officers. This, we feel, is a very, very important event, and we know you feel the same. So please help us move forward with nominations. I would encourage all of you to nominate qualified individuals from your organizations so we could recognize that element of excellence. Additionally, we will be hosting the inaugural INSA IC Summit on Thursday, September 12th, here in the DC area. This summit will be a comprehensive forum of senior ICE leaders and their industry counterparts to discuss relevant intelligence and national security issues affecting the country for the coming decade. I think many of you have seen what we've sent out from INSA on this. We all agree the subjects that will be discussed will be extremely insightful, very, very important, and we have some outstanding participants at this event. Details on both of these events are available at the INSA website. Please take a look at that, and thank all of you who have already secured your sponsorship or tabletop for this event. Now for tonight's program. As Director Sapp is speaking, please be thinking of possible questions to ask her. There are index cards on the tables. Just fill it in, because I know Director Sapp really wants to address your questions. If you have a question for Director Sapp, INSA interns will be circulating after the dinner to collect the cards. Following the dinner, there will be a discussion and a question and answer session moderated by INSA Senior Intelligence Advisor Charlie Allen. I think we all know Charlie Allen, and we know his major contributions. I want to note also that Charlie Allen is also the chairman of INSA Security and Policy Reform Council, doing some outstanding work. Charlie, thank you, sir. We encourage you to ask a question of the director, Director Sapp, and make this evening as interactive and informative as possible. The entire evening is off the record. And I repeat, the entire evening is off the record. This includes no social media, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So please, off the record. My friend and colleague, Betty Sapp, was appointed the 18th Director of the National Reconnaissance Office on the 6th of July, 2012. Previously, she served as the Principal Deputy Director of the NRO, and before that, Director Sapp was appointed the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, Portfolio, Programs, and Resources, in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Director Sapp began her career in government as a United States Air Force officer, and in 1997 she joined CIA, where she held a variety of senior management positions, including with the NRO. The NRO remains a focal point for innovation in the intelligence community. Director Sapp will provide a vision for sustaining that leadership into the future in an increasingly challenging budget environment. Once again, thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to an enlightening and insightful discussion. Director Sapp, if you would, please.
I want to thank Ambassador Detrani for that kind introduction. And I've already told some of you you're not getting any question cards. I'm just saying right now. I also want to thank Ambassador Negroponte for being here. We were talking before we even sat down that he's had a 44-year career in government. And certainly, as I remember it, he was a guy brave enough to take on the D&I role for the first time. So, very brave man. Now, Charlie Allen has already been acknowledged, but I'm going to give you a slightly different aspect to Charlie. You know, when I first came into the intelligence community, I was young and relatively new at this, and of course, Charlie was then an icon. He's still an icon, and I watched him a lot, and I just thought he was bigger than life and knew everything there was to know, and it's still true about all things Intel. But when he called me for this event, I got a whole different perspective on Charlie Allen. And the thing I learned about Charlie is that Charlie does guilt as well as my mother does. I wouldn't have thought anybody could beat my mother at guilt, but Charlie comes that close. So he called me about this and talked to me about doing it, and I said, Charlie, I don't like speeches, and I especially don't like unclassified speeches, because there's so little I can talk about, and the risk of getting myself into trouble is high, and no. So, being Charlie, he didn't take no for an answer, and what he did was he started comparing me to Tish Long, the director of NGA, my friend and colleague, and he talked about how Tish loves doing things like this, and she would do it, and I need to be more like Tish. And while that's true on so many levels, it didn't really make me come. And then Charlie went on to say that, you know, he's always been a friend to the NRO, and he was personally asking for this. And how could I possibly say no? And the guilt meter pegged up a little higher. And then he said, and you know, you're really doing a disservice to your agency. And I thought, okay. So that was a yes he finally got. And it was all for guilt. And of course, Chuck Alsup is on the phone as well. And Chuck says, don't worry, it'll be a small gathering. So we had Mr. Guilt and the Fibber, you know, as a combo. So I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about the NRO. And there really is not a lot I can talk about in terms of details, but I will talk about innovation. And I will also tell you that Charlie, having talked me into being here tonight, didn't really trust me to put a speech together on my own. He wrote notes for me. And then Lance, where's Lance? Lance followed with a full speech. It was like 9 pages. So Lance apparently didn't trust Charlie or me and was trying to help out. And you'll be glad to, I ignored both of those. But I did focus on innovation, which I think was Lance's idea. So I want to start with a story. And this story I've told before. I tell it all the time. And for those of you who have heard it before, it doesn't mean I'm not going to, I'm still going to say it. I'll just apologize to you if you've heard it before, but I'm still going to use the story. And this is a story about Percy Spencer. Have you ever heard of Percy Spencer? Except for the people who have heard me speak about Percy Spencer. But Percy Spencer, this story dates back to World War II. Early days of World War II. The U.S. wasn't even in it yet. And the Brits were, and they were struggling to come up with radar devices that could warn them of enemy ships, subs, airplanes. And they finally invented a cavity magnetron that would make the units both useful and of a size sufficient to make them deployable. And the problem was they couldn't make these cavity magnetrons fast enough. So they came to the U.S. for help. And Raytheon won the contract. And then I know there's some Raytheon folks out there. So Raytheon won the contract, and they put Percy Spencer in charge. Now, at the time Percy took this over, they were only building a couple of these a day. By the time Percy improved things, they were making several thousand a day. He really stepped it up. He did everything he was being asked to do. And by 1945, they were at full rate, doing a great job. But Percy noticed something. He was in the field, in the factory, and he was standing in front of one of these radar units, and he noticed that the candy bar in his front shirt pocket melted. And he thought, wow, I wonder why that is. And being a type A person like most of us, he didn't just keep going and worry about production. He actually wondered why that had happened. And then he started playing around. And he started playing around with food. And he noticed that the microwaves could be directed and used to cook food. Percy made the first microwave popcorn. And then by 1947, Raytheon made the first, what they called at the time, radar range, but the first microwave. Of course, now a staple of most American kitchens. So I love this story because Percy took something that was clearly meant for one purpose and adapted it to something very, very different. And I think, Percy would have been a perfect NROer because that is sort of what we have done all through our history. And so let me start with one of the first systems we did, which is, next one, well, I'm supposed to do this. GRAB. So GRAB was the first signals intelligence in space. And it was designed much like the Percy Spencer story. It was designed by a guy who had worked on submarine periscope systems back in World War II. And that guy was working on a bunch of projects for the Navy, for NRO, who was one of our early partners. But he was stuck in a snowstorm, in a blizzard, and he started playing around with, what if I took that to space? That same kind of system and took it to space. And in fact, on the back of his placemat in a restaurant where he was stuck watching the snow come down, he figured he could get that thing about 600 nautical miles and still pick up Soviet radar systems. And that's exactly what he did. He got authorization to build it in 1959. It was launched in 1960. And it did exactly what he thought it was going to do. It only lasted for a couple months, but it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And that was the first nation's ears in space. Now, unfortunately, GRAB 2 didn't do quite as well. And I don't know if this is a story Charlie knows, but GRAB 2 was on the launch pad and got up, but the launch vehicle didn't do so well. And it had to be destroyed. And this caused the Cuban cow crisis. Yeah. Debris from the launch hit Cuba. And fortunately, it didn't hit populated areas, but there was a particularly unfortunate cow that was standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the cow did not survive the experience. And the Cubans were a little miffed at having U.S. debris fall out of the sky and kill their livestock. And so they actually paraded the cow through the city streets. It did hit the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. And so we did keep on doing signals intelligence from space. We tried never again to have ground beef as a product. So if this was the first satellite in space and the first of the SIGINT satellites for us, the next one was the one we're most well known for, and it was Corona. And this speaks to how much space was a national priority at the time, because Corona had 13 failures before it was a success. So the 14th, it took us 14 tries before we got one up and got the film bucket recovered. But it was great stuff, because in its first flight over the Soviet Union, and that's what it was trained to go see, it got more intel data than all 24 of the U-2 missions that had gone before it. So it proved the power of the perspective from space and how well that could help us. And it wasn't just in the amount of data collected, but in the fact that it got critical information that we need to know on missiles the Soviet Unions were working and on their strategic bombing program. So this was originally intended to be a quick stopgap program, and more than 145 of these were launched. It was very, very successful. Now the problem with Corona, of course, is that it was an electrical-optical system, and it couldn't see through clouds, and it couldn't work through weather. So the NRO looked at that gap and said, we can build something that's a radar system from space. We fly radar systems on airplanes. We ought to be able to take one of those to space. So Quill was born. Quill was the first radar imaging system, and it was launched successfully. And next one, whoops, I'm supposed to do this, keep forgetting. It got a great image. This was actually in California. And it took an image when the cloud cover was extremely thick and the rain was extremely hard. And the image actually shows the rain, if that's where the arrows are pointing. The rain was so hard, it actually showed up in the image. And you can see the wave formation in the image as well. So we only took pictures over California, over the United States, because we were afraid that an active radar system would spook the Soviets and would tell them what we were up to. But we were pretty pleased at the result here. The problem was, and this is a continuing theme for us for the future, the people who looked at this compared it to electrical-optical images, and they said, boy, that's really ugly. So it was a great new sensor capability. It was a technical success, but it was our first lesson, and technical successes have to come with a lot of cultural and social engineering, or they're never adopted by the user community. So again, a continuing theme for us for current and future. Next one, whoops. So those were our very early days, and to no surprise to most of you in this audience, because you work with us, we still build radar systems and electro-optical systems, and we added some other kind of sensor capabilities, and we've added some communication systems, space and ground, to get all the data routed around very, very quickly. But, Desert Storm, Desert Shield proved the value of space, not just to the strategic, the policymaker, but to the tactical warfighter. And fortunately, the NRO and the fact of NRO was declassified in advance of Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and we got a chance to help with this. And that pushed us a long way to do things very differently in terms of number of products and number of customers supported. And so I'm going to show you a very, very short film about what the NRO does today. know, several of you told me about this in the sort of cocktail hour, but a lot of people have a view of the NRO that's very dated. And I found it very interesting. We had our first, they call it a CSART review, a Combat Support Agency review team come in. And it was a little interesting because we're not really a combat support agency, but they came anyway. And they found, these are all guys in the Pentagon, and they came out and watched how much we did in direct tactical warfighter support, and they were shocked. Because that is not the view they had of the NRO. And that's certainly the view they left with. And it's something we're very proud of. So I'm going to switch now from what we do to how well we do it. And again, this is a different view than a lot of people have of us. This is a chart we've shown a lot. You know, in the early days of the NRO, when missions were lasting for weeks or months, we did a lot of launches every year. In fact, one of my predecessors launched like 174 missions in his tenure. We don't do that anymore. Our satellites last a lot longer than that. So our typical is 2 to 3 years, or 2 to 3 launches per year. This was a particularly good year for us, and we actually got all these launches off on time, on schedule, successfully. And that's important to us because just like we talked about the Cuban cow crisis, launch is still the biggest risk to any satellite system. So getting past that launch is a big deal. We had 4 more follow the next year and then 2 more this year. And not only are the launches being successful, but the missions are being very successful in orbit. And that's not just our work, it's the industry partners we work with as well, both for the success of the launch vehicles and for the missions themselves. And that has not always been true. And again, this is what some people remember. We went through a stage where every mission we did and launched, and every company we worked with was affected, had a problem in orbit, and it looked like we had just lost fundamentals. We have gotten those back. Every mission has worked on orbit flawlessly. Most of them have been up and operational ahead of their scheduled dates. And again, thanks to us going back to basics and thanks to all of you for the mission assurance and the attention to detail and everything you put into those programs before we get them. So that's launch, and then of course we worry about acquisition as well, and this is where we're graded the most. This is our acquisition scorecard, and you don't see program names because of course that's classified, but we've had the all-green scorecard now for 3 years since I've come back. And that is not usual for space programs, and again, it's not the way a lot of people view us. So some folks remember notable failures we had back in the early 90s, and the one I can talk about is FIA, and that's what they think about. And that is not where we are today. Every one of our programs is meeting or beating cost, schedule, and performance baselines that are given to us by the community. And we take this very, very seriously. And this, again, is not just us. It's the industry partners we work with. And part of it's going to a different model, though. And I want to say just a few minutes about what we call evolutionary acquisition, because we have used that in our entire history. It's not a new thing for us, but we talk to it these days. And that means that we take a basic design and we only evolve a piece of it. And that does a couple things for us. One is it allows us to focus non-recurring money, design money, where we really want to. It's usually in the mission payload, where we have a new threat or a new opportunity or something to go after. We don't start from scratch across the whole new design. It allows us to do block buys with our industry partners, long-term partners. And that does great things for efficiency, and it lets those partners plan for the long term at both the prime level and the subs. And that's good, again, for both of us, government and industry. And finally, it lets us evolve our programs at the pace that is allowed. We have a very strong R&D program, and I'm going to talk about that next. But we expect those new capabilities to be matured in R&D, and then we introduce them when the program can take them. We don't want our baseline programs to be stalled waiting for something to show up. That's a big cost driver, and we cannot stand that. So you talk about Corona failing 13 times. You know, the tolerance for failure these days is not that. People, again, still remember failures we've had 10 years ago. Even in R&D, and I've had Dan Golden and teams say the same thing to us, even in R&D, you know, if you're not having a failure once in a while, you're not pushing hard enough. That's our benchmark. But even the R&D failures are not tolerated well anymore. So this is our way of pairing R&D, strong R&D with acquisition, making acquisition risk low, and still really pushing the envelope for innovation. And let me talk about that a little bit more about our R&D program. We do our own R&D, which is a real strength for us. And we pay a lot of attention to this. So even if the budgets are down, we still allocate a big portion of our budget to go into R&D. And we take this very, very seriously. And this is not only the way we feed our acquisition programs and make sure we're keeping up with threats and opportunities, but it's our way of trying very, very new things. Things that we may not have an immediate mission application for, but we think they're cool. And sort of like the early days, they might really have a new, completely different opportunity for us. And so again, this is about 7% of our budget. We take it very, very seriously, and it's making a difference. The satellites we're building today with you are enabled at the payload level about 85% by our AS&T investments that were made prior. Our transition rate is about 80%. And it not only enables acquisition, but it enables ops. So let me talk a little bit about that. You know, I talked about our role in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and we played a huge role in Iraq and Afghanistan. And some of that was direct overhead support, but part of it was fusing data. And it's the same kind of innovative approach that we used in the space. So this is a program that a guy came up with because he was flipping through PowerPoint slides. And he noticed that the motion, so that he could see the change spatially and temporally, gave him new insights that he didn't have before. And it's not just overhead data, it's other domains, it's other ents. And all we're doing, because we're used to big data, is putting it together and making it available to the analysts, people like Mike's folks, so they can see it. And they can notice change, again, in a given geographic area over time. They can see emitters move. They know what's going on. It gives them a way of knowing what's normal and what's abnormal. This has been a very, very strong program for us. Next one. This is a big one as well, and it's made a huge difference in the counter-ID effort, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And again, it's the partnership we have with the services. So this was developed by an Army guy who had led IED clearing teams in Afghanistan. And he came to the NRO as sort of a, post-Afghanistan and on his way out to somewhere else. But he felt very strongly, since he had lost people and he had seen people hurt, about doing something about this problem. And here again, we have somebody who's cleared and can see all the sources of information about whatever we know about IEDs. And the only trick he did was putting all those sources of information together, fusing the data, putting it on an unclassified chart. So every IED is just marked, or potential ID is marked with a red dot. And he fused that, he sent that out to a system they already had in all the tactical vehicles. So it shows up on their screens. And this system became very, very important. In fact, just last year, it found 235 IEDs. And it gave that information both to the guys who were in harm's way and to the clearing teams. So again, it's not something you would think about associated with the NRO, but it's something that, again, the power to manipulate large data and do something with it and find the connection to the people who need the data is a big deal. Next one. And I want to say just one more word about, again, tactical support. I have what we call joint collaboration cells at each of our ground stations. And these are in partnership with our partners in NSA and NGA. They're very important to us. But these guys are the ones that field calls 24/7 from customers. And the biggest customers who call in are the Army guys out front, the Marines out front, the Special Forces out front, and the Navy out front. And they have very small pipes for communications. You can't ship them large amounts of data. You've got to chip out what they need and get it to them. So, for example, we had a helicopter go down in Afghanistan, and the guys had just taken a tour, preparatory to being deployed, of the JCC, the Joint Collaboration Cell at East. And they had the phone number, and they called. I got to go get these guys. I don't know what I'm facing. I don't know how to set up a security. Help me. And we had something to them within an hour. So it's those kinds of things. So I'll tell you that these have become great things for us and for the user community. In 1 year, one of those sites put out over 250,000 products tailored to the user request and served over 1,100 customers. And again, majority Navy, special ops, guys who are disadvantaged from a comms perspective and need support. So I want to talk just a little bit about where we're going, and it's in those same themes. You know, the NRO, as much as we are now doing multi-int, multi-domain, and it's making a huge difference, as much as we expanded our customer base and our product base, we're still basically the way we grew up and what we inherited, which are stovepipe systems. Space tethered to ground tethered. And it's like that in a lot of you heard the NRO towers. They're in specific. We are breaking down a lot of that. So where were you going? It looks more like this, and this is what I can do on a classified slide. I asked my folks to put our future architecture on a classified slide, and this is what they gave me. Which has nothing, basically, on it. But it's an important thought, anyway, so let me tell you about where we're going. I've talked about Desert Storm and Desert Shield and what it meant for us in terms of going much more tactically relevant, much faster, much broader. The recent efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan have proven the power of persistent ISR. But it was persistent ISR in a very permissive environment. So I hearken back to the early days of the NRO. The NRO was formed because Gary Powers was shot down. So U-2, high-flying, still was not a survivable platform against the Soviet Union. As the United States turns more of its attention to Asia, that is not Iraq and Afghanistan. So I believe the NRO needs to be there as a persistent, globally there partner for the U.S. or asset for the U.S. So we are stressing persistence. We have that in some of our platforms, some of our capabilities, not in all, and we're driving there. We need to be resilient. Space is contested nowadays, and we know that. So we have to be survivable for the U.S. And we got to be affordable. Everybody knows we're having a budget downturn. We've actually met that by redesigning our architecture. It's got to pull together much better as an architecture, just not against given problems, but all the time. So that is where we're headed. And I'll say one more, and it goes back to the beginning. This is our mission statement, Super et Ultra, and for those of you who don't know Latin, it means above and beyond. And I like that because it says not only in terms of how we and where we operate in space, but it talks about the fact that I want my folks never forget to be pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible for us to do, for us to be. And so with that, I'm going to let you eat, and I look forward to your questions after dinner. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you for your attendance tonight and your continued support to INSA. That is to the members of INSA, to the sponsors, and to all of you who are here this evening, and I hope you're enjoying it. I'm glad to be back associated with the intelligence community through INSA. I think it's a very special group of people doing noble work for our country. Betty Sapp, what an impressive individual with credentials in financial management and acquisition at such a challenging time for the IC. We're blessed to have someone this qualified at the helm of one of the crown jewels of our community. And I was And I know I share with you the fact that I was very impressed by the presentation she made earlier this evening. The NRO is enjoying considerable success, 10 straight successful launches, extraordinarily exquisite support for our warfighters in far-flung places, and it is a beacon of innovation that is leading the way in finding efficiencies during a tight budget period to ensure we maintain the capabilities our nation needs in an uncertain world. I'd like to ask Director Sapp to extend the heartfelt gratitude of the entire INSA membership to the NRO senior leadership team and everyone at the NRO for their tireless efforts. Now, for the second part of our program, I'm pleased to turn the stage over to INSA's Senior Intelligence Advisor, Charlie Allen, for a discussion with Betty. If you still have a question to submit, the INSA interns are circulating and will be collecting them. Again, thank you to everybody for your support of INSA. We're very fortunate to have Charlie as our Senior Intelligence Advisor and appreciate all the work that he has done for INSA and the nation. And Charlie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yale, other schools where I was invited to speak, and I was Assistant Director of Central Intelligence for Collection, and I always spoke about the National Reconnaissance Office. And the reason I spoke about the National Reconnaissance Office was because I always used the phrase that our NTM capabilities help keep the Cold War cold. And I used it, as Betty knows, I was an incorrigible user of the NRO systems, working with their mission partners to do a lot of exotic things. And I tended to be very peremptory, and I remember that Tenet said, do everything you can, but keep it within some bounds. And General Hayden out at NSA said, if he wants to do something that's really insane, then call me. Otherwise, let Charlie have his way. So I had 7 years of that, and it was really great. So talking about guilt, I have 4 children, and I come from, my mother was Scotch-Irish, and you talk about guilt, you really can get a lot of guilt.
You learn from a master.
Yeah, you learn from it. So my 4 kids would be very empathetic with Betty Sapp tonight over the whole issue of guilt. I do have a few questions, and we expect more from the audience. So please write them on the...
Oh, before you start, I forgot to mention something and about the NRO. And that is that we've gotten several clean financial audits in a row. And my whole audit staff came out tonight, and they were nicely sitting behind me at my back. So stand up, you guys. So they've done a great job for us, and they're continuing to work with us this year, and we're really very grateful for them. So thanks for showing up today, and I at least had to do that for you. So
I think that's great credit that you have your audit staff sitting right behind you at the head table. Anyway, Betty, one of the issues has to do, and what Jim Clapper and all the program managers are working together is to deal with the budget cuts, dealing with sequestration. I was at the Aspen Security Forum last week along with Ambassador Negroponte, and of course that's just ripping into the military in a huge way. And it's inevitably beginning to affect the intelligence community in significant ways. And I'd like to get a little more broader understanding of how you're trying to deal with the budget drawdowns and the effects of sequestration, which limit your flexibility to manage this huge enterprise.
Yeah, it's one thing to take 10% cut in a year. You have to do very different things if that's going to extend through the whole FIDA. And so we, I think we have done the right thing to put a new architecture, to begin a new architecture that's really focused on, again, working together as a constellation versus as piece parts. And that's allowed us to do some very different things. And again, also allowed by technology. But we've saved 30% projected just in one program alone. And that's where we're heading. It hasn't meant that, and again, we faced the budget crisis like we face all problems. We're going to do something that's innovative, and we redesigned our architecture. So we saved all our mission and just did it very differently. And that's sort of where we're headed. It doesn't mean that the budget cuts don't hurt. We are taking down things that we're flying today, and they're above our requirement, but there are things that the users have gotten very used to. And so that is not painless for anybody. We are cutting radically all our infrastructure costs, and that again combines some redesign with just doing some things differently. We are taking a significant cut in our contractor support. And again, that may affect many of you here who support us in the program offices. And for us, you know, I was telling somebody, we own no people. All our people come to us with the help of CIA and Air Force and Navy and a lot of other community members. So that workforce has become even less stable over time as those parent agencies want to do different things. And so those core contractors are a source of stability for us and program knowledge. And so a 30% cut, which is what we've had to do, is significant for us. So it has been real pain. And one of the things we're very worried about is making sure we sort of know where the budget situation may be headed. And that's what no one of us knows. But again, for people like us who do long-term programs and don't want to sign contracts unless we can follow through. And that's not good for anybody. But we also want to do the right things to put the next future in place. So it is a challenge.
Thank you. One of the things I'm pleased you spoke about this evening was FIA and the fact this is something that happened more than a decade ago. You see the success of the NRO, which is phenomenal, and and systems are green and lasting a long time. At the same time, we have some people who are in government and some people who just left government have that different image of the NRO.
Let me just say something real quick on FIA.
That's good.
Because FIA was 3 programs. One of them didn't work so well. The other 2 are successful. In fact, one of them is very successful,
yes.
Working today. And one of the senators, and it's interesting, I was telling Lynn this before we started, one of the senators was out with us who always raises FIA as FIA. And she was at one of the contractor facilities. We were actually showing her the product from that piece of FIA. And she was just amazed at what we were doing. And we were using the other program name, and I told her, you know, that's FIA. And that's FIA? And she was shocked, because that, again, is not what she's heard, and not certainly what she's heard from the folks who prep her. So, yeah, FIA is not something we talk about anymore, but, and it was not the right way to do things. Mm-hmm. But 2 out of the 3 program pieces are working today and working very, very well.
I've seen those pieces, and Betty is absolutely right. It's phenomenal capability from space. Well, some critics have stated that commercial imagery can replace our highly classified and highly complex and powerful systems. That in the future, as we move into further into second and third decades of the 21st century, commercial imagery. We have a lot of foreign governments flying commercial imagery, and we have certainly Digital Globe, which may be here tonight, combining with GOI to be a very strong commercial imagery firm out in Longmont, Colorado. Do you want to talk about the capabilities of commercial imagery? Do you still see a need for the powerful systems we have today?
Commercial imagery is phenomenal stuff, and some of you in here build it. It does a great job. And the NRO certainly doesn't want to be building anything that somebody else can do. So we have been having this debate with the Congress for years now. The NRO doesn't decide requirements. You know, there are other people do that. We just build what the requirement owners tell us to build. And right now they still are saying that our system has some key capabilities that they absolutely need and will not do without. And those are capabilities that commercial does not provide. So that is still what we're responding to. And again, we're not the requirements people. Interestingly enough, you know, we used to be totally just, we can build it, so we will. And now we're always asked for a requirement. Show me a requirement that says you ought to be building that. And when we show them the requirement for something like that system, they say, well, we don't believe that requirement. So, you know, we get that sort of from both sides. And in this case, we have a real strong requirement from our mission partners and from the community. And again, as long as that's in place, we'll certainly fight to make sure that requirement's fulfilled.
Tell me about, you've talked about, and I believe Ambassador Negroponte just mentioned, 10 successful launches. It strikes me that the NRO as a whole, all the directorates, and you talked about breaking down the tower stovepipes, that they're working better today. There must be some factors that have led to this tremendous success, which is not really publicized anywhere. Certainly the Washington Post has never written about it. Doubt if it ever will. But you guys have done such a phenomenal thing. What powerful factors have you brought together? I know that General Carlson said that, you know, he put more discipline in schedule and things of that nature. What do you think are the 5 or 6 factors that may have changed and made you such an incredible success in the last 10 years?
We put a lot of pressure on discipline, and certainly that's true. It was true for him, it's still true today. But I was talking to somebody about the NRO towers, and the NRO towers are still there, they're shorter. So we've told people, you know, the NRO prides itself on end-to-end, that we own everything from R&D to operations. And that's still true for us as an organization, as an enterprise, but individuals who used to own big segments, all the way from acquisition, R&D, to their operations in one tower, don't own that anymore. So they own the space, but ground and operations, those things are horizontal. And as soon as you make something horizontal, you got to put a very strong system engineering team in place. And people have to talk to each other. Because if you aren't talking to each other, your ground isn't there in time, and your launch vehicle isn't there in time. And if you don't own all those people, you have to talk to each other. And so that has been a very powerful thing for us. We actually talk to each other as seniors and all the way down. And again, bringing people sometimes together in the same room, it's amazing what they can do when they know Emmett or SIGINT, and they bring those two pieces together, and others as well.
Okay, this is another question that is always being asked. How does the NRO balance and deal with the pressures to do smaller and less expensive systems versus traditional, very complex, very strong and long-lasting systems? I know that your AS&T, it looks at smaller systems. That is the Advanced Science and Technology Directorate under Bob Brykowski. I know that they work very closely with other agencies like CIA on this. How are you looking at this issue of smaller, lighter, flexible capabilities and balancing what you're doing now and what Bruce Carlson talked about? He actually said a next generation system.
We've got our core systems that, again, we're evolving over time. We've been doing that for a long time, and the systems have the same name, and some people look at that and say, you guys aren't doing anything new. Those systems are fundamentally different than they used to be. And again, they have incredible capability. But there are other mission sets that we haven't been able to satisfy in the past, or they are new mission sets. And sometimes we go after that by putting a new capability on an existing platform. And sometimes we go about those very, very differently by leveraging something that is very different. And so we use the full gamut of opportunities out there. I can't say much more than that, but we use the full gamut of opportunities out there. And some of those are very quick to deliver. Others rely, again, on other systems designed by others.
Great. And this is sort of keeping with the same question.
And it's not just, by the way, AS&T. It's all the
it's all the directorates. In the private sector, this is a question. In the private sector, the majority of innovation and new ways of operating comes from new and entrepreneurial companies. What is the NRO doing to take advantage of these innovative resources that you find in certain areas of the country, like Silicon and Austin and so forth?
I've been told that the price of entry is high to the NRO because, again, most of what we do is classified, and there are a lot of companies who are doing very innovative things that don't have all that stuff, SCIFs and secure networks and all the things required. So we have a program we've had for a long time called the Directors Innovation Initiative, and it's very small contracts, but again, it's looking for those innovative things out there that we can leverage for Intel purposes. And I was just having a round table with one of my folks, and one of the guys sitting at the table was from industry, works for us now, but he came from industry. And he said, that was the best fun I ever had, was working on a DII project, a Directors Innovation Initiative. So that is the way we get new partnerships. So if you get that kind of contract and what your idea proves out, we will help you get the rest of the way. And that has been a very strong initiative for us for brand new players. But even our current big partners, and I'll look around the room and say a lot of you are here, you are a source for innovation on both the core programs and on others. You know, we've, for a long time, given out what we call our Pioneer Award. So those are the ones where it's innovation that has been so important to us, we took a new direction based on that. And more than a third of our Pioneer Award winners are contractors. They're not government. So we take innovative ideas from all our partners, including our contractors, current and future.
Thank you. I saw Jill Singer here tonight. I know
she's over there. I saw her too.
She was your CIO,
yes.
And I believe in
fabulous CIO.
Yeah, she, old friend. I believe under eyesight, which is the intelligence community information technology enterprise, the NRO has some special responsibilities given to you by Jim Clapper, the DNI, on network security. How is the NRO addressing the security factors in light of the recent events? Clearly, this question is directed at the Snowden event.
I think we're all very focused on fundamentals, after the Snowden event. There were a lot of things that maybe we haven't been paying as much attention to as we should. And I think everybody's very focused now on IT and IA and the potential impact on the eyesight efforts started at the DNI. So I'll say no more than that. I mean, there is a lot of energy now on this. And again, in a time of budget downturn, everybody was sucking money out of IT as savings. We're putting part of that back in now to make sure we do protect ourselves. So, and I think the whole community is going to do that.
This is a question you've already answered in some ways. How do you approach the challenge of balancing an increasingly open and transparent public environment against the need for protect classified information systems? The NRO has always flown beneath the radar, really has. Jimmy Carter mentioned that we did space reconnaissance in 1978. Not many people here know that. And I believe it was perhaps in 1992 was the first time we ever mentioned in public officially that there was a National Reconnaissance Office. So you've lived in this wonderful world that's been very very black, very dark. And how are you going to deal with this as the pressures come for more transparency?
I think we're very transparent on the things that others need to know about us. I mean, we're very transparent to the Congress, or we think we are. They don't always agree. We certainly want to make sure our books are open and we have independent auditors who come and look at those. You know, what we do on the mission side, again, those we serve certainly know what we're doing. Those who oversee our spend of the money and our responsibility and executing those missions know what we're doing. That's not necessarily a public domain for us.
Okay. Here's a question I don't totally agree with, but I'll ask it.
It's probably Mike Decker's right there.
Yeah. It says competition on the ground systems can really drive down costs. There seems to be a trend in the NRO to award sole source contracts to the large ground providers and avoid competition. What will you do to increase competition to lower costs in the future?
Well, I wouldn't agree on that trend. I think we're competing our ground contracts, and we, in fact, are looking at very different providers for some of those. Some of what we do for space, like command and control, is not so different from what they do for a lot of non-space systems. So there are a lot of things we do for space that the piece of space that's unique is fairly small. So we are looking at the broadest set of capabilities that we could apply. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but I want to spend NRO money in payload mission space. I do not want to spend anything more than I have to on comms and ground writ large. And there's a lot there that the commercial industry can help us with, and I plan to leverage that for all it's worth.
What can you say about launch and the use of fairly large and heavy space launch vehicles? And do you see moving more towards lighter launch vehicles and SpaceX and other competitors out there?
We use all the launch providers today, and we've actually dealt with SpaceX. We use them, and we're hoping that they will be capable of launching more of our core mission sets. So it's what the mission needs. I wouldn't spend money to redesign a spacecraft to make it lighter. I certainly wouldn't do that. One of the promises of FIA was it was all going to be medium lift, and that didn't work so well. So yeah, we use heavy, we use less than heavy, and we certainly use all launch providers who can work for us.
Here's another question. The work that the NRO does leads in technology, innovation, advanced concept development. How does this sort of work comport with the lowest cost, technically acceptable acquisitions approach? I saw Ash Carter out at Aspen, and he originally, I think, said that it had unintended consequences. Are you worried over LPTA, and is your acquisition processes among the program managers, the contracts office, your CISOs, and others, all designed to get the best quality regardless of price?
We certainly balance price, but lowest cost, technically acceptable, is not a method we like. In fact, we just had a services CEO day recently, and I think a lot of you came because I heard that in the cocktail hour. But we periodically get our mission folks in, and now we've started the same thing with the folks who provide services for us. And that's been a great exchange for us, and I'm glad so many of you came to the recent session. But one of the things we heard from all of you is that's not a method you like, and it's not one that we find all that helpful either. So again, we use contracting strategies that work for us, and I think that you consider to be fair ways of choosing between competitors.
Another question. You mentioned evolutionary acquisition. Are you open to brand new entrants to the space market, or only on evolving with existing commercial partners? There are some new capabilities out there that you may have interest in, new entrants into space.
When I talk about evolutionary acquisition, I talk about saving the majority of the spacecraft and evolving, putting new money into what we need. we almost always compete that new money. So when we talk about new payload capabilities, that's where the new mission is. And even if it's with the same prime, we will compete that new mission capability. So there's something there for anybody who's got capability we need to look for.
You have mission partners. You have National Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
We do indeed. Mike's there, yep.
With Tish. You have the NSA with Keith Alexander. What is your relationships, and how do you work that relationship so it's solid and you collect incredible information? How does all this work so that there's a great synergy in your mission partner work and cost savings?
We have great relationships with NGA and NSA and DIA and others. They live with us, both at Westfields and at the ground sites. Very open exchange. It's wonderful when you have partners like Tish Long, very forward-leaning. Same with Chris Inglis. I speak more to him than General Alexander at NSA, but again, very forward-leaning. When we get impatient, people get impatient with us for the length of time it takes to get new capability on orbit from the time we design to the time we launch it. We get impatient with the length of time it takes users to accept new capability and actually use it. And that's usually far longer than it takes us to design and develop. We've been flying radar systems for a long time, and we still fight that. So our mission partners really help with that. If we can get them to team with us and believe in something new, because they are the most direct leads. NGA has far more people deployed out with users than I can ever have. So NGA is very important to us making that sale. Same with NSA. Same with DIA. So they are with us in the ground stations. That has always been a strong partnership. In Westfields and DC with the budget battles, that's sometimes more difficult. But we have a strong team right now in terms of all the agencies, and we get along. So that's been extremely important. And I thank Mike for being here. I know Tish couldn't make it, but I thank Mike for being here.
What about your congressional strategy? How do you view your relationships with the oversight committees and with the defense authorizers? How do you feel that you stand with the Congress generally as opposed to, say, a decade ago?
I think we're doing certainly better. I think we've still got a way to go in terms of just sort of getting our creds back with the Hill. And it differs by committee. So we have 6 who pay a lot of attention to us. And again, we respect the role they have, and we certainly try and be as forthcoming, as transparent as we can be. They do have an important role to make and to play. So yeah, sure. We take that very seriously. Again, we still got some building there to do.
About 3 more questions. How's that?
Okay. Sure.
Does that meet your schedule tonight, Betty? What about, and I had a question here that I wanted to ask, has to do with, you have people in detail to the NRO.
I do.
There have been comments made by some that, and this is, I promised I would ask this from a person you know, that, there's a SASC report out which talks about the Secretary of Defense and the DNI look at establishing a permanent cadre at NRO headquarters rather than the detailees. You have lots of CIA officers, lots of Air Force, Navy, what have you, and people from your mission partners.
Yeah,
that's a big question.
It is. And, for those of you who don't know, the NRO owns no people.
Right.
So we sort of count on the kindness of CIA and Air Force and Navy, and those are our 3 biggest, but we get people from everywhere. So we usually pay, but they still have to, supply the slots, and the challenge for us, of course, is making sure we have the right people in the right areas. And when you have 19 different career services between the different groups in Navy, Air Force, and CIA, and then all the others who are there, that's a tough proposition. And the tenure of some of those officers has changed. So the Air Force used to stay forever, and they don't do that anymore. And the CIA used to stay forever, and they don't do that anymore. So finding, again, the right tenure people who can take on very big projects and make a success of them is sometimes a challenge. So the idea of a cadre keeps coming up. Ideally, we would be able to. The power of having that diversity in a group is just wonderful. Managing that is sometimes a challenge. So the question keeps coming up, and I guess we'll debate it for a while. A quick story, and this just is the difference between mixing CIA and Air Force people. And we have both at our ops sites. And for most of the time it's military, and when you have one military commander coming in, one going out, we do the big ceremony. You have the formal change of command, and both families are there, and it's a big, big deal. We actually pass the flag, and we make speeches, and we recently put a guy in charge of that entire group who has a different background. And he had to go support one of these change of commands. And he said, boy, this is a new world for me. My agency, we do a change of command with a one-line email. And so having this big ceremony, I'm just, not used to that. But again, mixing those people with very different backgrounds and very different experiences, that is a source of innovation for us. It's also a cultural challenge. And again, having the right level of experience on big, big programs is something we continue to struggle with.
Great. You do support to military operations, in particular to the Humvee, to the guy in the last mile. Says the question here is, NRO employees and contractors are used to using portable handheld electronic devices. What is the NRO doing to implement secure mobility devices, say, for operational purposes?
We use secure devices supplied by others. So the whole idea of getting the last tactical miles, we actually, and this is the same with Red Dot, the source of the information is all classification levels. By the time we put that on the screen for the operator, it's unclassified. He doesn't care where that's coming from. He doesn't care if it's the most sensitive human source or if it's overhead or where it's coming from. All he wants to know is whether he's in danger or not. And he doesn't care what the source of the information is. We know about that and we push it out to him, but all we're pushing is a dot. We're not pushing classified stuff. We're just pushing a dot. And again, all the sources then are disguised. So when we say last tactical mile, we're pushing valuable data that's been separated from its sources.
That's great. I'm going to interrupt here. Yeah, this is...
Charlie Allen.
Thank you.
Outstanding, just outstanding. If we could just help.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really outstanding. We have over 30 additional questions. We thought we would keep it here. Over 350 attendees. It speaks to the important role that the NRO plays, and certainly under the leadership of Director Betty Sapp. So again, let's hear it for the NRO and certainly the Director.